I enjoyed this game a lot. It's my personal favorite that I've played in 2026 so far. Yeah, if you just want games to be weirder, you have not played anything like this before, I will say that. And that is the reason why I'm not going to be talking that much about specifics about this game. But what I do want to talk about is this game as a remake. I'm talking about remakes because most people around here kind of hate remakes at this point, right? I kind of feel this way, and a lot of people I talk to kind of feel this way. There's just an instinctive anti-remake vibe around at this point. And I think that's fair, right? Because, you know, the mainstream remakes, the remakes that get the most attention in games. I mean, we were just talking about this with Blue Point, right? Like they just fail to capture the magic, or don't even fail to capture the magic of the original. They just like aren't even trying. They're not even trying to do that. They're just trying to make it more palatable and whatever. And yeah, like remake defenders love to point out that, oh, the original still exists, you know, but like I was saying, remakes are taking up space. They're in a certain sense taking up space culturally. If you love something, you want it to have room to flourish. That's just a basic that's just a basic thing, right? And like, you know, I love Demon Soul. I love the original Demon Souls. And because Demon Souls remake happened, I don't know what's actually going to happen, but certainly we're less likely to get an actual like remaster of Demon Souls that's more faithful, and, you know, we're less likely to get like the official servers back up, which that game really needs. But also like culturally, like you see discussion about the remakes, and it's sometimes hard to find discussion about the originals. Like when you're looking up Majora's Mask, you get Majora's Mask 3D. You don't have to type in Majora's Mask 3D to get Majora's Mask 3D stuff. You get Majora's Mask 3D when you type in Majora's Mask. And that's kind of annoying. And yeah, same with Resident Evil games, same with Silent Hill 2, whatever. So the remakes are kind of crowding out the originals in a way that I and a lot of people don't like. And another thing is, even for newcomers, right? Like when you're playing one of these games for the first time, when you're playing Resident Evil 4 for the first time, there's like a gravitational pull toward the remake, right? Like most people who aren't willing to like seriously research like which version of every game I should play like before they get into it, they're just going to play the remake. They're just going to assume that it's fine and play it and have a worse experience. And like even for me, you know, someone who is willing to do the research and stuff, it's making it more complicated and annoying for me, right? Like it's adding to the research that I have to do in order to figure out which version of a game I should play for the first time, which is already a problem with like, you know, different versions on different platforms and things like that. Yeah, it's a pain. It's a pain for me to have one extra thing that I have to research about. You have to be willing to ask what we are actually gaining in exchange for those downsides, right? I feel like it's kind of disingenuous to argue that there are no downsides to remakes, which is what people want to argue. So yeah, that's kind of my background coming into Love Eternal. I hadn't really thought too seriously about remakes for a while because like mostly I just try to ignore them. But yeah, Love Eternal, the more I thought about this game and why it's maybe an exception for me, the more I started to wonder what a remake even is. Let me explain what the original Love is. The original Love is a very, very hard precision platformer from like 2015. It is probably my favorite of that kind of game. Crazy difficulty precision platformers. I love the vibes. I love the feel of the levels. Yeah, I think the level design is really good. Yeah, I don't know. I love the simplicity of the basic mechanic. And so yeah, more than most like ultra hard precision platformers I've played, I think it's worth going to that difficulty, like taking it to that difficulty and asking me to put that much time into it. Yeah, River's saying is bringing up film adaptations of books, which is something that I thought about quite a bit. But yeah, I'll get to that. But yeah, that game is not reasonable for the average player. It like went years without being beaten for the first time, which partially because it was really obscure, like, you know, Toby did not market it in any way, presumably, and he was an unknown developer and all this stuff. So like, don't be too intimidated by the fact that it took years to be beaten. Like a bunch of people have beaten it at this point. I've beaten it. But it is like, you know, in kind of fan game difficulty territory, which is just not reasonable for the average player, right? And there are good things about the game that only work because of that extreme difficulty, but there are also good things about the game that don't require that extreme difficulty. There are good things about the game that anyone could appreciate, right? Like there's it has really good atmosphere. It has good like setting, even without like, I don't think there's any dialogue in the game or anything, but it just has a cool setting and vibes. And like I was saying, the basic feel of the movement and the flow of the levels is really good. The feeling of, how it feels in your hands to play a level, right? Like it's like capturing the feeling of like playing a musical instrument well or something like that, which is something that precision platformers, can do better than most kinds of games. Yeah, that's something that I appreciate about this game more than most platformers for sure. And yeah, Love Eternal, as far as I can tell, it exists largely to bring those other good things, not the good things that require the extreme difficulty, but the other good things to a much bigger audience, right? Instead of thinking of it as a remake, you could almost think of it as a new difficulty mode. You have this game Love that only has like ultra giga nightmare difficulty mode, and now the remake is like the normal difficulty mode of the same game, which it kind of is. Like I've always thought that to appeal to a wider audience and like more specifically target every player within like, okay, let's say you're making a level based game and target you try to tune the difficulty for like the average player in your target audience, right? Let's say there's 1 million people who can enjoy the game within that difficulty range that you've set, right? Like static levels like this, they kind of define the difficulty pretty firmly. If the game is too hard for you, like if your skill is too low outside of that difficulty range, or if you're too good and you just breeze through it first try, like you might not have a very good time. But even for those same 1 million players, a lot of them would have a better experience if you give them an easy, normal, and hard option. And the game does a good job of like, funneling you into the correct one. The game, those people would all have a more targeted experience if you did 3 different difficulty levels that are like a little bit more precisely targeting each player. And then if you're doing that, you can also probably catch more of the players who were kind of off the low end, right? Who were kind of like, the game would have been with one difficulty level, it would have been a little too difficult for them. And then on the maybe then the hard mode can catch a few more of the people who would have thought that the game was too easy before, like it's not only expanding your potential audience, it's also giving the average player who would have enjoyed it already a better experience. So yeah, I've always thought that more games should at least try that. I'm not claiming that all games need to do this or anything like that. Very, very far from that. I think it's good when games only have one difficulty level. I personally often like that, but it's always been strange to me that more games don't try that. Cause like, level design for a game like this is a pretty small percentage of the overall work of making the game. You're just arranging elements, right? I mean, you have to put a lot of thought into it, but this game kind of takes the approach of taking levels from the original Love and just taking the idea of them and just making them less precise, which works really well and seems like it wouldn't be that hard. It seems like it wouldn't be that much work compared to the amount of work that went into like production values and stuff for this game. Anyway, you can think of this as kind of a different difficulty mode, but this game, Love Eternal, also adds a more explicit story, which, maybe he would have done that for the original if he could have, like if he'd had the bandwidth for that at the time or whatever, the budget. I think the original works really well as is. Like the people who are deep enough into platformers to have a good time with that gameplay, they don't need anything extra, right? Like they're totally in it for the gameplay. They're totally sold based on just having a really hard precision platformer that's well designed. They don't need like extra motivators like story or whatever. Whereas like a decent sized Steam audience, which seems like he's targeting with this game, if you're trying to capture even half of the Celeste audience, right, you kind of need a story, or at least it's at least probably a good idea from a business perspective. And so yeah, with all that in mind, the conclusion that I came to about this game is that it feels less like a remake and more like a translation. And when I think about it that way, I find it really hard to consider it a bad thing. It's kind of bringing me around on remakes, at least in theory, because like I am regularly grateful for translated novels, right? I think a lot of people assume that when they read a translated novel, they're getting like the full experience pretty much. I am under no illusions about that. I don't think that's true at all. Like I think in some cases I might not even be getting half of the value of like what I would get if I read the original, because I think translation quality varies a lot. And it's just a hard problem in general to translate really really good writing. But even if I'm getting less than half of the value of reading the original thing, that's fine. Like that is still worth it for me. That's still like I'm glad that exists because I simply do not have the time in my life to learn every language, like every language that great literature has been written in. I just don't have time, like especially to the level of fluency required to appreciate something that's subtle like a novel, right? Like that's different than just reading nonfiction or whatever. Yeah, I think the same is true in a case like Love Eternal. I think the same is very clearly true. Most people who could appreciate this some of the stuff that this game does with the atmosphere and with just the basic feel of it and stuff like that, most of those people should not be spending hundreds or thousands of hours getting really really good at ultra hard precision platformers. Like I don't think the world would be a better place if everyone did that or if like a lot more people tried to do that to like appreciate this kind of game, you know? It's translating, just like just like the translation I've been reading of In Search of Lost Time is making some percentage of the value of In Search of Lost Time accessible to me as someone who does not have the skill of reading French fluently. Love Eternal is making some percentage of the value of the original Love accessible to people who do not have the skill and aren't going to develop the skill of being really good at like execution heavy games or precision platformers specifically. And I think that's cool. I think that's kind of like the model of a good remake, or like if you even want to call this a remake at all, you know? Yeah, I really think translation is a good term because when you think about it that way, it's less likely to culturally override the original in the way that bothers me. No one is going to recommend the English translation of In Search of Lost Time as the definitive version. Actually, I think I have seen some arguments that it's such a good translation that whatever, but in most of the time, I'm like that's an exception. No one's going to see the translation as a replacement for the original, and I think that's really important. And yeah, you could imagine both games being in the same package, kind of like I was talking about earlier. Like if it was just two difficulty modes in the same package, I could see an argument for that being better than it being a separate remake type of thing. But honestly, in this case, the difficulty gap is so huge between this game and the original Love that it kind of seems mean to do that, right? Like it seems mean to, people who beat Love Eternal on the normal difficulty. If it then showed them, here, do you want to play this on hard mode? Like, and it's just the original Love, like they would just get completely obliterated and have a bad experience. So I think it makes sense to have it as a separate thing. You can think about it in terms of like how much of the value you're getting for how much of the effort, right? Like people who aren't really good at precision platformers are getting maybe like, I don't know, these are kind of meaningless numbers, but they're getting maybe like 80% of the value of the original Love by playing Love Eternal. There's also just different things that are good about Love Eternal. It's not totally just what's good about the original. The story is also really interesting and the structure and stuff. But let's just for the theoretical remake discussion, let's say like they're getting 80% of the value for like 1% of the effort, right? Like it would take them so much effort to get good at precision platformers, and it's like playing Love Eternal by comparison is like nothing, and they're getting like most of the value. So that seems good to me. That seems like a good thing to exist in the world, even if it's not, my favorite thing. Even if I want more ultra hard autism games or whatever, it seems good that that's something like that exists. Whereas something like, I don't know, Resident Evil 4 remake. I don't play a lot of these remakes, but I can imagine that maybe something like Resident Evil 4 remake is like less than half the value for like almost the same amount of effort. Like you could say like maybe Resident Evil 4 remake is like 40% of the value of playing the original, 80% of the effort to play it, right? The original Resident Evil 4 is a little bit challenging to come to terms with in some ways. I can recognize that it is easier to get into a more modern control scheme or whatever, but or like a more normal modern control scheme, I should say. But it's not that hard. Like it's a pretty reasonable ask, I think. And the game gets a lot out of that. And that unique stuff that the original Resident Evil 4 gets out of the control scheme is lost. So I guess with my percentages thing, I'm kind of talking about like unique value, like value that you can't get anywhere else, which is mostly what I'm concerned about with these kinds of things. Anyway, you kind of get my point. It doesn't seem like a great trade-off to make it just like 10% easier to get into Resident Evil 4, but you're getting so much less. You're getting something that's much more generic, right? It just doesn't seem like a great trade-off. And yeah, like I said, if Resident Evil 4 Remake didn't exist, I feel like a lot more people would just play Resident Evil 4. I'm not going to get into the specifics of Resident Evil 4 Remake. I just kind of picked an example that seemed plausible. It seemed like a plausible fit for what I'm trying to talk about. I actually haven't played it and I don't really plan to, because I like original Resident Evil 4 and I don't like the sound of what they changed. Yeah, I just don't play enough remakes to have good examples at hand for this, but yeah, so I could be wrong about the details there, but hopefully you get my point. The mainstream remakes that we usually get, the main problem is they're just clearly the business overriding the art, right? In every way possible. Like they're trying to make things more palatable. The people working on it probably can't even see what's special in a lot of cases. Because sometimes it's really subtle. Like there's a subtle magic to Silent Hill 2, the original, that is just really hard to capture. I don't know if the original creators could capture that really, if they tried now. But they're not even really trying to capture that. They're just trying to make something that cashes out on like the name recognition and the nostalgia and all of that stuff. So yeah, I think it's worth being a little bit more thoughtful, and I'll try to be a little more thoughtful going forward about how I talk about remakes, because I do think there are good remakes. And I think this is a pretty good example. Even though it's not exactly a remake, it's to a large extent a remake. And yeah, like he's making a different artistic statement here for a different audience. And yeah, you have to respect that. You have to respect that. This whole thought process about remakes leads me to one interesting question, which is, when's the Angel Game remake? When is the Angel Game remake, Toby? I mean, you know, I'm mostly joking, but I would love to see someone try to get one of these kind of dodging, avoidance kind of games, or just like simple movement games, like Angel Game, something like that. I would love to see someone try to make it more mainstream without watering it down. I think there's potential to bring a game kind of like Angel Game in certain ways into the mainstream. And let me explain what I mean. Because like, unlike with Love, I don't think you have to like water anything down. I don't think you have to do like difficulty settings or different modes for different players or anything like that. I think you can make a game that is a 10 out of 10 for me, and it's a 10 out of 10 for like a relatively casual player at the same time, in the same mode. The simple score chasing game like that is a really good format to try to do that in. Like, I think it's hard to convince people of this. I'm going to try, but it's hard to convince people of this because there aren't great examples to point to. There's no one game that I can easily point to that kind of does it all in terms of what I'm talking about here. The closest example that comes to mind is just Tetris, right? Everyone loves Tetris in a way that is really unusual. You know, usually the more casual gamer audience and the more hardcore audience, their tastes don't overlap very much. But Tetris is like a standout example where kind of everyone loves it. And I think a big part of why is that it's kind of balanced for all players from the very start. Like from minute one, Tetris is balanced for all kinds of players because you control the difficulty with how you drop the blocks, right? Like by default, the blocks are dropping really slow, so there's no pressure on like really inexperienced players, but you can also drop them instantly. You can go super fast, which, you know, maybe you want them to drop automatically instantly, and there are modes and different Tetris variants and stuff for that. But like the fact that you can control the pace so much goes a long way to make the game instantly enjoyable for advanced players, even while it is appealing to a complete casual. Like there are other examples I can bring up to explain what I mean, because I think a lot of different games can do something like this. Because I wrote about this a little bit with Post Void, my essay about Post Void, explaining why it's a lot deeper than you think, and really just a better game than people realize. Part of that is how the scoring system works and how it makes the game engaging for a very wide range of skill levels. If you're relatively inexperienced with FPSs or action games in general, you will probably struggle to survive at the beginning in Post Void. And it'll be an accomplishment for you just to get through the game at all. And that's fine. That's good. But it also gives you control at a very granular level, like moment to moment. You are constantly making decisions about how much risk you can take on and how much extra difficulty you can take on. Because you can run past stuff. And the more stuff you just decide to just run past, the less extra health you're getting, and the more you have to dodge the stuff that you're running past. You're not actually, it's safer to take it slow and kill everything. But running fast, running past stuff, going faster, makes it harder and more engaging for high skill players. And the game rewards that with score. Another example that people might be more familiar with is Devil Daggers. Like in Devil Daggers, it's not as strong as an example because it's not as granular like Post Void. You don't have as many options for how to tweak the difficulty moment to moment. But in Devil Daggers, you can leave the spawners up. You can always leave the spawners up to farm extra gems. And whenever you do that, it makes it harder, right? It still takes a long time for that game to ramp up, and so it's not super engaging for high level players from the beginning in the same way as Post Void or like Syncopause is kind of the goat of this, right? As it is for many things. Syncopause is like the strongest example of this to me. It does such a good job integrating the scoring system into everything else and making it just the right level of challenge all the time for such a wide range of player skill levels. The problem is that range is like starts way up here and goes like beyond what anyone has ever managed to like get to. The skill floor for that game is still super, super high. Even though it works for a very wide range, it's like, yeah, most people are still outside of that range. So yeah, I'm hoping 868 back is a little bit better in that regard. Anyway, hopefully you understand what I mean. Like something like Angel Game, I really think there's potential to make a kind of game like that captures what's great about Angel Game, but has a better format, structure, scoring system that makes it even more appealing, honestly, to someone like me, while still making it much more appealing to a more casual audience. Because Angel Game is just a little too hard. Like off rip, Angel Game is like stupid hard for most people.